often find ourselves stuck in a rut, in a confusion. We may often feel deceived that the other person has not done right by us, or the situation we find ourselves in is unfavorable, is confusing, is puzzling. So, why does that happen? How did we, or what is it within us that makes us land into the situations where we often find that we are stuck, that we cannot get out of it, where we think that everything around us is chaotic, is in a mess, and being in a state of confusion ourselves, we are unable to find a way out of this confusion that we have created for ourselves. And in fact, we might just blame or assign responsibility to our outward situations, to the person that has put us in a situation. We would often assign blame to the circumstances that we are in, and would not look at ourselves, would not think that it is who we are, and because of ourselves we have landed into this situation, that we are stuck in a state of confusion. How do we then come out of it? What should one do to get oneself out of a situation, a pattern, and make sure that whatever that one does next is simply not a repetition of the old thing, is simply a not the same confusion in an old form. What is it that then got us in the situation we are in the first place? How do we find ourselves in this position where we are confused, where we are puzzled, where we are stuck, where the other has deceived us, hurt us? How did we come to this point? What all contributed to our condition that we find ourselves in? It is quite clear that things did not happen out of the blue, that our situation is not in a vacuum. They are not isolated from the life that we are living. The problem that we have, the pattern that we are stuck in, the confusion that we find ourselves in is not different, separated, divorced from the life that we are living, from the contents of our own mind. So instead of assigning responsibility to the outward circumstances, to a person, to external situations, we have to closely look at the contents of our own mind. We have to pay attention to the life that we lead, to who we are. Because whatever that happens within us, whatever that happens to us, has not simply emerged from nothing. It is a result, a consequence of how we are living our life. It is a consequence of our understanding of life. It is a result, a product of what all lies in our mind. So there is this criteria that is present within us, upon which we judge, upon which we live, upon which we take decisions in our life. And that judgment, that decision, this criteria through which we act, this action is continuous, it is constant, it is not episodic, it does not occur for a while and then stops. We are continuously being dictated. Our actions come out of this inward criteria that we have within. The thoughts we think, the feelings that we have, our boredom, our excitement, the desires that we have, our motivations, our intentions, our dreams, our hopes, our ideas, all of this is a product of this criteria of judgment that we have within. And what is then the root of this criteria from which we are basically living our day-to-day life? Our everyday life is directed by this criteria that we have within. So we have to closely look at the origin of this scale, this standard, this foundation through which we are living our everyday life. And this criteria, since we have this criteria, we have to firstly look at ourselves, because who we are, what we think about ourselves, gives birth to this criteria that we have within. And then we, what we are, is not an isolated subject. We do not exist in a vacuum. We do not live separately from our environment, our surroundings and our climate. The content of this criteria is informed by the conditions in which we live, the time in which we are born, the space in which we are born. The content of all of our conditioning contributes to who we are, and from there this criteria actually emerges. The situation, the century we are born in decides what is important for us. The space we are born in, the geographical location we are born in, the country, the city, the land, that contributes to this criteria. So we have to carefully look how our surroundings, how space and time in which we exist plays a part in the making of us. The foundation upon which our life is standing on, in this foundation is all the conditioning of our culture, our economic background, our societal, political background, our educational background, all of these factors direct our life. They are at the foundation of who we are, of our being, and from that comes this criteria of judgment. We may think that we operate as an independent identity from our society, and we are free inwardly, that we think freely, that we have a mind of our own, that our thoughts and our feelings are personal to us, that they are ours. But upon closer observation, we will find that our entire life is really dictated by the outward factors that are present in our environment in which we are born, and it is they who decide our thoughts, our feelings, our priorities, our actions. We always function from this background, which in itself a product of all the other different backgrounds, the cultural, the social, the political, the economical, the ideological. All of these things contribute to our action in real time, to our thoughts and to our feelings. It is one unitary process which is going on all the time, in which is also included our physical structure, from where we will find how we are so biased towards physical security that we never actually pay attention to what psychological security is, and we are deeply inclined towards securing ourselves physically. And this physical component is also a product of the millions of years of our past. Since the physical organism has evolved over thousands of years, over millions of years, so it is already conditioned to favor our physical security and not even counter in what is it that makes us psychologically, what is it that builds us from within. We will be operated by our physical priorities, wants and desires, and so all of these components contribute to our criteria of judgment. And not knowing that where our so-called choices, decisions are coming from, we find ourselves stuck in a pattern. We find ourselves in a state of confusion from which we are unable to get out of. And even if we do manage to break out of the pattern, to come out of our jungle of confusion, we find how the thing we have landed upon now is similar to what we had before. It just appeared new on the surface. It presented itself as something entirely different, but it was again the same repetitive pattern and confusion. We just trade one pattern for the other, one state of confusion for the other, but we never actually get out of our state of confusions. So when we see how we are inwardly deeply conditioned by our outward circumstances, situations, environment, it is then we can break out from the confusion that we find ourselves in. We have to see our own conditioning exhibit itself in every moment of our life. This watchfulness of ourself, how we behave in our life, the things we think, the feelings we have, our deep ignorance about ourselves, the ideas, images, notions that we carry, how our outward situations are actually running our life. When we closely come in contact, when we closely see how our mind is constantly weaving narratives, that how it likes to live in imaginations, that with every single thought, idea, it is simply reinforcing its past conditioning. It is simply strengthening the hold of environment, the conditions on it. We may have fantastic ideas, splendid beliefs, detailed plans of how life should be, and how we should do certain things in order to achieve that idea, but we will find that every step, every bit of that plan and the supposed goal, purpose that we have established for ourselves is informed by the conditions we live in. We are constantly deciding what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, without even knowing. There is an inward mechanism that is automatically doing it for us, which is deciding what is good, which is deciding what is right. Until we see this inner mechanism in operation, how it expresses itself in our every decision, thought, feeling, we will live our life in an autopilot mode, because this mechanism within is so deeply rooted that the automatic nature of its operations lost on us, that we are unable to really see for ourselves how this mechanism within, which is the result of our conditioning, is driving our life every second, consciously and unconsciously. We simply are moving according to the contents that our mind is filled up with, and those contents have been derived by our surroundings. To see for ourselves how we have lost our mind, that our mind is really not ours, that there is not even an inch of space which is free in our mind, and it is simply stuffed with external information, with so many programs that it is simultaneously running on, and one program just simply replaces the other, and this operation goes on constantly. The mind is totally unaware of how it has been hijacked, how it has been completely colonized by the outside information, by the commands that it is receiving from its background, and that background being the background of our culture, society, etc. The mind has this entity which is the me, which assumes that it is in control, which assumes that it is free. That freedom, that sense of control is illusory. This entity within the mind which convinces itself of its freedom, which convinces itself how independent, autonomous it is. This entity itself is the product of the mind. There is no autonomy until one has understood how the mind actually operates. One is aware of all the contents of our mind that entirely controls it, that has colonized every inch of the space within. The me which claims to be free, which asserts that it has its own ideology, that it has its own opinion, judgement, which are free of any biases, any prejudices. This very me is a fragmented entity which is an emergent property of the mind itself. It secures itself through the contents of the mind, through identifying itself with whatever that is present in the mind, thoughts, memory, experiences, knowledge, identities, etc. With all of these, the me identifies with, and from this identification it comes into existence and then claims to be a free entity, insists on being autonomous, on having the capacity to make wise, intelligent decisions. Is there any intelligence in whatever we do in our life? If all our life is simply a movement in our own conditioning, a product of the background from which we operate, every action when is simply arisen from the conditioned foundation upon which our life is based on, how can there be any intelligence? It is simply a mechanical operation that is going on, which is so automatic, not autonomous. It is so automatic, like which simply runs on its program, not being aware of itself being a program. Our mind is simply a storehouse of information, experiences, memory, that it gathers, and upon this it operates. All of this is the basis on which it lives its life, and when it is completely ignorant of what lies within it, of the contents of its own structure, of the information, the coding of its own programming, if it's unaware of it, it simply lives under the illusion of being intelligent, of being wise. There is no wisdom in all of this. It is merely a physical operation that is going on. Since the brain is a physical organism, it functions. And when we do not know how it functions, when we haven't understood it, when one has not observed the movement of the brain, the contents of one's own mind, then the brain is simply a physical organism which runs on what is being fed to it. It has the authority of its physical impulses, of its physical desires, needs that it wants to meet, and on top of it there is the social ideologies, norms that are established in its environment, which it follows. So is there really any autonomy, intelligence in this operation? This entirely is a material process. There is no intelligence here. It is running like a machine, like a computer would run, on the program, on the information it is being fed, on the code that it is written on, it is being founded upon. One has to observe all of this happening in real time, of how our conditioning simply expresses itself in our day-to-day life, in our relationships, in our fears, in our sorrow. All our sorrow, misery is the result of this mechanical existence that we have grown accustomed to. We have become habitual to this entity called me. We have to see how it comes into existence, how it relates to the contents, how it identifies with the content of the mind and comes into existence through that identification. Without understanding the entire machinery of the mind, we will always have confusions and patterns that we will ascribe to. We will change one pattern for the other. We will change one type of confusion with the other. But our life will simply be a result, a product of these multiple patterns, habits, confusions, because there is no intelligence here. Every fragment is running, operating in its own direction, and our life is simply a sum total of all of these fragments, where we are divided, where in one part of life we become one thing and in other we become something else, where we are a professional and then here we have some other identity of a father, of a son. These multiple fragments just exist without any quality of wholeness to them. We don't have any holistic understanding from where we live our life. Confusion, problem, misery, anxiety, fear is what our life basically is, with a feeling of insecurity on top of all that. In such a condition, being stuck somewhere is inevitable, is what is bound to happen. We are entirely responsible for ourselves. There is no external agency, entity, person that will guide us, because all of that has resulted in the life that we are already leading. One has to be, as they say, a light to oneself, because without that, our life is moving in complete darkness. We are blind to the forces that are actually running our life.